I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
Level with us. Hello and welcome to Level With Us, a cozy video game discussion podcast where every week we play a game with our listeners and then meet back here to discuss. And this week, we're going to be talking about our favorite gaming experiences and our top 5 games from the year 2021. So, overall, Marcus, how do you think this year was for games, for you?
This year has had a lot of great titles released. I've talked to other people who are into video games, and this year it was possible to have like some really remarkable indie titles kind of slip through the cracks because there were so many excellent big budget and small budget games that came out. For me personally, this podcast specifically has made it more of a video game year for me. There was like a gap of 2-3 years where I really didn't play many video games besides like Smash Bros. And then the pandemic happened and I played a lot of Animal Crossing and a few other games. But this year, I played a lot of video games, and it wasn't because I was shut up in my basement and had nothing else to do. It was a deliberate choice. So it was a good year.
I was going to mention the same thing. The podcast kind of encouraged me to splurge a bit on some indie titles that I probably would have waited on otherwise.
Sure.
So I don't think I would have played Overboard or Toem or Deponia, among others, this year if it weren't for Level With Us. So besides what I just mentioned, I felt like this year was a lot better for a Nintendo fan than last year. There was a lot more interesting titles. There's a big variety of them. And then, like you said, lots of indies. And it's looking like next year is going to be even crazier. So we'll have a lot to look forward to, but we'll talk about that later. Right now, I want to talk about our favorite games of 2021, and I want to make this clear that this is games that we played for the first time this year. So some of these didn't come out this year. Anything goes as long as it's a game that we experienced for the first time. And there might be some little caveats or exceptions in there. But before we do our top 5s, I want to get into some honorable mentions. So I have a few games I played that didn't make the top 5, but I still wanted to bring up. One of them was It Takes Two. I got to play that with my wife just a few weeks ago. And
that's the game of the year, Jared.
Yes.
It's the game of the year.
Game of the year 2021, It Takes Two, honorable mention for Jared. It's a great game. It's really fun. I want to play through it again with you, Marcus, or with someone else, because the asymmetric gameplay design is quite good. And there's so much variety, and you never get tired because it just throws new mechanics at you all the time, and it's really fun. We may be covering that game on a future episode, so look forward to that.
Oh, cool.
Another honorable mention for me would be Psychonauts 2. I really love Double Fine, and this one is a little short, and the load times were really bad, but I'm really glad I played through it. Tim Schafer's writing is as excellent as ever. And the variety of the brain levels were all really fun. So, great game. Didn't make the top 5, but really good. And then finally, my last honorable mention would be Rocket League Sideswipe on the App Store.
Nice.
I've been playing this nonstop lately. I'm a big fan of Rocket League. I kind of fell away from it for a while, but like 2019, that summer, I played it like every day for hours. And got really, really into it. This year they released an app, and it's a 2D version of Rocket League. So car soccer, but 2D. And it's so fun. So fun. There's no microtransactions yet. I'm sure they'll add them in later, and that'll ruin everything. It'll ruin my opinion of the game. But I really liked it. Good times. Marcus, do you have any honorable mentions before we move on?
Sure. Overboard. Did not make my top 5, but I really enjoyed the game, probably conceptually the most. Like, I really thought it was cool what it was doing. A murder mystery where you're the murderer is a pretty cool premise. It was a little too short, probably, to make my top 5. I think if there was some... Anyway, why am I talking about what I don't like about this game? I'm trying to say, I liked this game. It was a good one. Also, in the spirit of app games, because you mentioned one, I never remember how to spell this, so I'm gonna actually have to look it up. It's like SNRXS or SNRKX. Yeah, I can't even find it because I guess I deleted it to make more room for other games. The game is kind of a minimalistic app game. It has elements of snakes, like a snake game, and kind of an auto shooter, or like I don't know, almost tower defense, because what you're doing is you're extending this chain of snake party members that all follow each other, and you can basically customize your party to have different synergies, and that's the biggest part of the game. So you're not really controlling when these guys shoot, you're just like moving around the screen trying not to get hit by enemies. So it was a good time waster, and surprisingly had some depth to this strategy, considering that the art style is kind of 8-bit squares, I guess. So
cool. I will have to look up Snarks sometime and see what I think.
Yeah. But yeah, those are my 2 honorable mentions.
Okay. Well, then let's just go into our top 5. And for me, the order of these isn't super significant, but it's fun to do a countdown. So let's start with number 5. For me, number 5, weirdly enough, is Stardew Valley. Now, I did play this a tiny bit a few years ago. Didn't like it, didn't get into it. But this year, this did come out in 2021, there was a multiplayer update that came to consoles. So when that came to Switch, I wanted to give it a shot with my wife, and once we did, it became our life for like 2 or 3 weeks straight. Literally, as soon as we got home, we'd like throw chicken nuggets in the oven and immediately start playing Stardew Valley until bedtime.
This is what being an adult is.
It is.
Throwing in the chicken nugs and then just playing a game.
Yeah. It was something we looked forward to every night. It's something we talked about and thought about throughout the day. It's all we could look forward to. And as a co-op experience, it was excellent. It was really fun to be in split screen and be like, okay, I'll water, you go check the beach for, new shells or whatever, and then we'll meet back and hit the mines together. And it was just really fun to micromanage. Really fun, really great. I wish we could experience it fresh all over again. So looking forward to Haunted Chocolatier whenever that ends up happening. Don't know if it'll be co-op, but...
Nice. My number 5 is Spiritfarer, a indie game released on Switch and I think a few other platforms. I think it came out in 2020, but I played it for the first time this year. It is very soulful, I guess, heartfelt. I don't know what the word is, but in terms of music, animation, story, it is very, very sweet. The animation, the character animation is pretty remarkable. As far as like the gameplay, what you are the Spiritfarer who takes souls to the underworld, which sounds kind of like dark and dreary, but what you're really doing is floating around on this boat that kind of turns into a floating village that you craft different shops, or I guess resource type things. There's a bit of like resource management to it, like you'll have sheep, you'll have kitchens, all of these different things, and you're collecting things from each of them. Yeah, soundtrack, great, gameplay, really fun. So I thoroughly enjoyed it.
That's definitely a game that's kind of hard to nail down the genre. It's sort of life sim, but it's a side scroller, there's a little platforming.
But then it has a story at the heart of it, because like there are individual character arcs that begin and end.
Right. Yeah. I like Spiritfarer. My wife got into it a lot more than I did. She actually played through the game twice on her own.
Really?
Yeah. We
didn't know
played through it partially in co-op, and we were kind of hoping it would become our next Stardew Valley, but it didn't really land for me. But I really liked how much she got into it, and it's definitely one of the most beautiful games I've seen in a long time.
I forgot it was co-op. That's like, and it handles co-op like fairly well, in my personal opinion. I think that's awesome that you can have the second character just plays as a cute little cat. It's great.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that brings us to number 4. And for me, that would be Neo, The World Ends With You. Hey, it's the game that started our podcast off.
Oh my gosh.
It's not very often that one of your favorite games of all time gets a sequel. And, the original was that for me growing up. One of my all-time favorites. I wouldn't stop talking about it whenever I learned that someone had heard of it. And the sequel, Neo, it has some little issues, but it was so fun. And I'm really, really glad they made it. And I would not have an issue at all if they want to keep making games in that franchise.
Well, this is my number 3.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, I will tag along and say the Marcus that played the DS, The World Ends With You game, this is the perfect sequel for that Marcus. Like, I've changed somewhat, but like it really made a solid sequel for the game. Like, if you liked that game or disliked that game, this one is just kind of an improvement on the original. Like, they do a lot of things.
For me, it was the story, I think. I was so invested in those characters.
Yeah, I think the character design and characterization, 3D graphics, it warms the heart whenever a kind of 2D game converts over to 3D and it goes well.
Yeah, well, and it kept a lot of 2D elements, which was great. It kept the character art, which was excellent.
Yeah, very smart.
Great game. I'm excited to revisit that one at some point. Well, what is your number 4, since we already went over your number 3, I guess?
Oh, whoops. Number 4, Super Mario Odyssey.
Wahoo!
I'm only 4 years late to this game. For reasons I didn't really get into it when it came out, but now I did, and breaking news, it's good. It's a good one. Mario Odyssey feels in a lot of ways a culmination of years of 3D Mario games, both in the sense that it pays homage to a lot of the older 3D Mario games, and also just the mechanics. The movement mechanics are very tight. It has a ton of content, both in terms of pre and post game. Yeah,
I'm really glad you finally got to experience it yourself, because for me that year 2017 was like the best year of video games. I played through Breath of the Wild and Odyssey and Splatoon 2 and just so many good games. And the Switch was new and fresh and everything. I like Odyssey a lot. It is an excellent game. I've already said this word a lot on this podcast, but variety is a big deal in games, and I thought Odyssey does the variety of its worlds very well. There are always multiple objectives to do, so the world kind of becomes a playground, and you can mess around and still be progressing, or you can, do the main objective and still have a fun time. So, do you have any highlights for, like, favorite worlds?
Oh, man. I really did just enjoy how each world felt different, and that there were a lot of them. I kind of liked Princess Peach's castle, which is the world you unlock at the end of the game, because, you beat the game and then it's like, oh, hey, we have another world that has, like, more power moons than all of them, or, like, a ton of stuff going on here. So that was really exciting and fun. Luncheon Kingdom looks really cool.
I really liked the Bowser's Kingdom, kind of this Asian castle looking thing with these rainbow clouds everywhere, and you play as a Pokebird, which is like one of my favorite captures in the game, I think.
Right. It moves fast. It gives you a lot of different types of play style opportunities, by capturing things, different worlds, different objectives. So, yeah. So I've already said my 3, so what's your 4? I'm sorry. I've already said my 3, so what's your 3?
My number 3 would be God of War, which I mentioned 2 episodes ago.
That's not a Nintendo game. Jared, that's not a Nintendo game.
I said there would be some exceptions here. This is best games of the year, not Nintendo.
No. You can't do this to me.
I feel the pull of Sony slowly dragging me away.
No.
The Switch isn't that powerful.
No. I mean, if you really get down to it, the graphics card is subpar.
Right.
That's the evil devil on your shoulder, Jared. Get rid of the PS devil. Stick with your home. The Nintendo loves you. Sorry,
I don't love Sony, but I do want to hit some of its biggest exclusives, and I'm really, really glad I finally played God of War. I've said everything I kind of wanted to say a few episodes ago about it, but maybe it's the recency bias, because this was a game I played within the last month, but the narrative is really well done. The feedback loop of gaining experience and upgrading your moves and your skill trees is a really great loop, and the exploration just hooked me. I played hours of not doing the story because it was so fun to row around and look for treasure. Even though I barely crafted any new armor, I just wanted to open every chest and get every material I could find. And I just haven't really played a meaty single-player experience in a long time. So for me, it was really fun to have that time sink. So, old news, but God of War good. That brings us to number 2. Marcus, would you start us off on this one?
Yeah. Metroid Dread.
Hey!
Is that your number 2 or your number 1? I have a feeling.
It is my number 2, in a way.
Okay. Oh my gosh. In a way, I don't know what that means. Okay.
Well, let's talk Dread, and then I'll explain what my number 2 is.
Let's talk Dread. It was a fun experience. Like, it did what it wanted to do really well. It was my gateway into the Metroid universe, because I really hadn't played any of the Metroid games. And I, generally just really enjoyed it. It was a fun game. It was cool to also, since it came out this year, hear about other people's experiences, talk to people who were more familiar with Metroid and how it shaped up to them. I think probably the parts of the game that kind of made it one of my top games of this year were the Emmy sections, where it turns from a exploration type game to a horror game, basically. And anytime they can pull off the parry, which is extremely difficult, you feel like a boss. And then of course you have these kind of cinematic moments where you blast them and you destroy the Emmys. So yeah,
it was nice to have a big Nintendo game come out at the end of the year that a lot of our friends were super into, that we could talk about. And recording the Metroid episode with our friend Dallin was one of my favorite episodes we've done on this show. So the reason I said it's sort of my number 2 is I actually am considering the Metroid series as a whole to be my number 2, because I had the opportunity to play all of the 2D games before Dread, or at least the remakes of some of them. And this was kind of a big deal for me, because until this year I did not like Metroidvanias. I really dislike getting lost. I dislike being stuck for hours not knowing where to go. It's one of my least favorite feelings in video games. But Metroid Dread kind of helped push me into it and understand what it's all about and really enjoy it. And, actually, it's not just the 2D Metroid games. I got to play a little bit of Metroid Prime. And more importantly, I got to play a lot of Metroid Pinball this year.
Oh, nice.
Which is unironically so good. Like a really, really good pinball game. And for a while this year, I was a commuter. I took a train up to where I work, and a lot of those hours of travel were spent playing Metroid Pinball. Among other things, I was also collecting some Game Boy games, and I got really into the Pokemon trading card game on the Game Boy.
Nice.
But that's a story for another day. Metroid Pinball is really good, and that's my number 2. I liked it more than Dread.
Metroid Pinball, yeah.
More than Dread.
Bold choice. Bold choice. Do it.
I can't leave out Dread or Pinball, so that's why I'm saying Metroid franchise. And the other 2D games are good, too. If I had to pick one, Zero Mission would probably be my favorite among the 2D ones. But Dread good, Pinball good, all good. I like Metroid now. Hope they make more Metroid games.
Number 2 on Jared's list was Dread Pinball.
Yes.
Good. Okay, number 1. I want to hear your number 1.
Sure, I can start us off. My game of the year for 2021 is Ori and the Will of the Wisps. This game blew me away. It's really, really good. I already knew it was going to be good before I started it. I knew the game was gorgeous, but it was a wonderful experience start to finish. Truthfully, the story I told earlier about me not liking Metroidvanias and then getting into them started with this game. I actually played this one before I started playing the Metroid games, and I never got lost once. So if I hadn't gotten into this game, I don't know if I would have even tried Metroid. This game ignited my love for the genre, and it was so fun. It's such a solidly designed game. Like I said, it's gorgeous. I'm just repeating myself now, but I love Ori. Fantastic game. Marcus, you got to play it sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now that I know that you're top of 2021, like it'll bump it up my list.
What was your number one for this year, Marcus?
My number one was Griftlands. Griftlands clicked with me. I was fascinated by the kind of sci-fi Star Wars-esque world. It had a lot of depth to it. The deck building mechanics, I thought in general were really fun and engaging. I really enjoyed coming up with new combos. I thought the writing was spectacular. More than anything else, I just played it a lot. It hooked me enough that I went through its prestige system, I guess, which is whenever you beat one of the 3 stories, you can play it again, but the difficulty has been bumped up. And the reason that you want to do this is because when you get EXP, you get new card packs, basically. You get new cards that will randomly appear in the world. So that means there are more options, more combos you can discover in the decks that you build. So yeah, I just found it was really engaging. I think everything it tries, it handles and does really well. Yeah, it's cool. And probably the number one thing that I liked what it did was its relationships and morality system. I think that's the best game I've ever played in terms of making your choices feel like they matter, like there will be consequences, without telling you, if you choose this option, you're the renegade route. Instead, it's, if you choose this option, so-and-so is going to remember it, and who knows, they might be, the guard at the front of the door later on, and if they hate you, it's going to be a lot harder to talk your way in. So like all of this web of consequences I loved. Yeah, Griftlands, very good. I liked it a lot.
That actually surprised me that it was your number one. I knew you enjoyed it. I didn't know it was kind of a big highlight for you.
Well, I've played it a lot more after we did our podcast. Yeah, I wasn't expecting your top either. Both of us, I'm happy that we both brought up games that the other person wasn't necessarily had on their radar. That's cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also interesting that we both chose indie games, and I think that
shows our taste.
I think that's indicative of kind of where video games are at right now. I think indies are really kind of trailblazing for video games. There's so much genre mashups and experimental art styles, whereas AAA titles are usually sequels and they're big budget and they're fun, but they're usually not the innovative ones, in my opinion. I just think it says a lot when indie titles can become someone's favorite game of the year. And I don't think that was the case 10 years ago. I think that's a recent phenomenon.
Right. Well, I feel like indie studios, they also are usually comprised of people who love and enjoy video games themselves. They're often
very passionate.
Yeah, often passion projects, which means that I'll often see mechanics or aspects in them that remind me of older video games that kind of maybe have slipped through the cracks of the modern AAA movement or direction, So like the genres and the creativity that pops up in indie games, I think, is pretty often unparalleled.
Well, awesome. This has been fun. Before we wrap things up, though, I want to talk about our most anticipated games of 2022. I have a guess as to what yours might be, but would you kindly share with me what you're looking forward to?
Yeah, same as my most anticipated game for 2021, actually. The sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Gosh, we need a title so we can stop calling it that.
My gosh, we need just a title and then I can call it what it is.
Why are you looking forward to that game, Marcus?
Breath of the Wild was good. So good. Very good. One of my top games, good. And I would like more of it. That is all.
When I played through the first game, I was like, they got to make a sequel, and it could just be an asset flip, and like they barely change anything, and as long as it's like a new world to explore, I'll still be 100% happy with it. But now that it's been kind of a 5-year wait, I think my expectations have shifted somewhat. I really hope they do some interesting, different unique things with it.
Right.
Add in some mechanics or, do something really fun with
Shake it up.
But for sure, that's my number one as well. For me, I'm also going to mention Splatoon 3, and it's not one that I have like a ton of hype for, but the thing is, when Splatoon 2 came out, that was my life for so long. I got really, really into Splatoon 2 when it came out, so I'm looking forward to doing that again, especially now that I have some friends. Especially now that I have some friends who are aware of Splatoon, and I think it would be fun to do multiplayer with them. So I think that'll be good. I'm also looking forward to Rabbids. Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. The first game was kind of a sleeper hit. Also a 2017 game. So a lot of sequels this year for 2017 games. But I love Mario plus Rabbids. I don't even like tactical games, but that game is great. So looking forward to seeing what Ubisoft can do with the sequel as well. Well, I guess that will wrap up our little discussion for today. Level With Us is going to go on a little break for the holidays. We'll be taking a few weeks off, but when we return, we will be talking about Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is the next Pokemon game that is looking to hopefully shake up the formula. So you can expect our next episode to be then. Thank you to everyone who's been listening to our podcast, and we hope you have a very happy holiday. But before we leave, we have a little Christmas present to share with all of you. Marcus?
I wrote a silly little Christmas song. This one is called The Nativity Play Blues. We would love to share it with you, and I think we'll wrap up with it. So, hope you enjoy.
And until we see you next time, I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
And we'll level with you then.
The nativity tradition always makes my day, but whenever I'm in it, it's a bit cliche. If we shook things up, would it be a sin? 'Cause it's ironic, there's no room in the inn. I'm getting fed up, I don't mean to be crass, but every stinking Christmas I am cast as the donkey. That's not what the Bible calls it, but the donkey. I'm getting fed up, I don't mean to be crass, but every stinking Christmas I know how I'll be cast. There are so many other things that I could be, but the angelic concourse ain't got room for me. I could have been a wise man, but I'm a pretty dumb guy. I could have been a shepherd, but I'm too sheepish to try. If you're thinking what I'm thinking, then I think I'll pass, 'cause every stinking Christmas I am cast as the donkey. As the donkey. If you're thinking what I'm thinking, then I think I'll pass, 'cause every stinking Christmas I know how I'll be cast. I'm stuck in a rut, ain't there something more than being sat on and crawling on all fours? Maybe it's to teach me to know my place, or maybe it's because I've got a long, long face. It's a part of the tradition that I hope don't last, 'cause every stinking Christmas I know how I'll be cast. 'Cause every stinking Christmas I know how I'll be cast. 'Cause every single Christmas I am cast as the donkey.
Well, let's talk Dread, and then I'll explain what my number 2 is.
Let's talk Dread. Sometimes it comes to me in the middle of the night, later, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m.
No, let's talk Metroid Dread.
Oh, Metroid Dread, okay.